Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
Jesus said, "If you hold to my teachings, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free."
Researchers tell us that at least 15% of Australians will experience a major depression at some point in life. No one is immune, including Christians. Spiritual giants like John Bunyan, Martin Luther and Charles Spurgeon all battled with depression. When Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones released his book, Spiritual Depression, it shot to number 1 in the list of Christian best-selling books. That should tell us something of the degree to which Christians grapple with depression. How do people cope with depression? Many try to deal with it by turning to drugs or alcohol, which only compounds the problem. In extreme circumstances, some see suicide as the only way to cope. In such cases, suicide is not really an attempt to end life, but to escape the pain. Negative emotions are a warning that something is wrong. Emotions are mainly a product of our thoughts. To tell people to stop feeling the way they do is not only unhelpful, it's condemning. But helping them to change the way they think may help them to change the way they feel. Millions have discovered that the truth really can set us free.
This is Set Free with Ken Legg.
And welcome to the program. Phil here along with author and pastor Ken Legg. And our subject this week is a sound mind. And Ken, as you said, depression is a pretty big subject. A lot of people battle with it every day.
It certainly is a big subject, Phil, and I need to say right at the outset that all we can do today in our limited time, of course, is just to touch upon that subject. There are, of course, a range of causes for depression. That's why it's such a big subject, and that must always be kept in mind. There's no one size fits all, you know. Certain people who have, particular personality types, for example, are at greater risk than others. People that are prone to worry, people that are shy, people that tend to be hard on themselves, perfectionists, if you like. They tend to struggle more with depression. And then, of course, there are physical disorders such as chemical and hormonal imbalances, sleep loss, glandular dysfunction, and so on. They're just some of the possible causes for depression. Then there's anxiety. The book of Proverbs says, anxiety in the heart of a man causes depression. There you go. Proverbs 12, verse 25.
I didn't know that was there.
Yeah, no. So if somebody's not coping with life, they're getting anxious about life, they see no hope, they see no solution, they're going to get more and more stressed out, and as a result go into a sense of despair and despondency and become depressed.
I think it's interesting you quoted there from the Bible on this in Proverbs, because it shows the Bible has insights even into this subject. Some people would say that it doesn't, but clearly it does, and no wonder really, because it's God who put us together in the first place. He's going to know, when things go wrong, what do we do? Go back to the manufacturer's manual.
Yeah, and in fact, what I want us to do today in our program is just to take one example of someone that was going through depression, suffered a depressive episode, if you like, and that person was Elijah. Now, if you look at 1 Kings chapter 18, you see Elijah as, the champion at the height of his ministry. He'd just taken on the prophets of Baal, all 450 of them in one, just call down fire from heaven, just outrun Ahab in his chariot. He was unstoppable. But then the next chapter, it's a total contrast. Jezebel says, this man's going to die when I get hold of him. And he goes into this incredible depressive episode. And what that shows us, as James says, Elijah was a man with a nature like ours. We sometimes put these people on a pedestal and think that they're different to us, not even human, but he went through what we go through. Now, let's have a look at the kind of things that really tended towards making him depressed. The first thing is that he was very much a person who lived in isolation. You don't see him hanging out with a lot of people. In fact, when that happened, he took off and he left his servant behind. I mean, the very few times that we see him with a servant or with, an assistant, then he clears off and leaves him back in some place called Beersheba and just takes off on his own. Second thing is that, he took on God's burden in almost a personal way. We have to be careful of that. For example, people do get depressed at times about the state of the church, and they can internalize that in such a way that it becomes their problem. We take these burdens on behalf of God, but only God is able to really handle the full weight of those things. I think another thing with Elijah is the incredible swing. He had this public success, and that always makes us vulnerable, Phil, I feel. he was catapulted into the spotlight. He said, until I say so, there's not going to be any rain. So 3.5 years, because there's one man said so, there was a drought, and everybody knows it's because of Elijah. This man's got power with God, but this can be a dangerous time. There he is up on there on Mount Carmel. He takes on all the prophets of Baal. He calls down fire from heaven. This guy's becoming a superstar, and more, the focus of all the people is upon him. Then, as I say, when he opens up heaven, the rains begin to fall. He takes off, and Ahab takes off. He outruns King Ahab, who's in his chariot.
Yeah,
so this
pretty amazing.
Yeah, this guy's probably thinking, what can't I do, And he's getting sort of a little bit carried away with this success. But then, of course, comes this anticlimax, and that's where things go wrong, when, nothing seems to have changed, because Jezebel says, well, we're not turning back to God. In fact, we're coming after Elijah and we'll kill him. So then he gets perplexed. He thinks this is how it's all going to pan out. It doesn't work out the way he thought. So he takes off and he says these words, Phil. He says, it's enough. Now, who hasn't said, I've had enough? Enough is enough, I alone am left. There's nobody else that's standing up for God. I've done my best. No, it hasn't worked. So, Lord, take my life. There's no point in going on.
But that certainly wasn't the case, though, was it? There were 7,000, was it?
Yeah, well, that's right.
And
he had a lot to learn.
An interesting thing there, I think, is if those 7,000 had been around him and encouraging him or visible to him, that's a whole other thing, Yeah. Maybe he wouldn't have gone down that path. What can you do, though, for someone, if you know someone who's that low? He was pretty low at that point, perhaps even suicidal, looking at the prayer that he prayed. Yeah. What did God do?
Well, let's look at, what God did. I mean, he ran out of gas, but he didn't run out of grace. Thank God for that. In fact, grace is magnified. I mean, you think about Elijah's ministry. When he was obedient in a time of famine, God sent ravens to feed him, okay? Little tidbits on a daily basis, little bits of meat and so on, and, he's sustained. When he's disobedient, God sends angels to feed him, angel cake. So that's the grace of God. He pours out his blessing on people that are running away. Look at the disciples. When they threw it all in, they said, we're going back to the nets and the fishes. Jesus turns up along the side of the seashore there, and he says, cast your nets on the other side. They get full of fishes. And what do they say? It's the Lord. This is the grace of God. They knew, they'd experienced God's grace so many times. So God then comes to Elijah, and he tends, first of all, to his physical needs. Now, I think that's important. This guy is exhausted. He's burnt out. He's run. He can't run anymore. He's tired. He's weary. He's hungry. And so the first thing that he needs is sleep to rest his jaded nerves and a good meal. So God lets him sleep. And then when he awakes, he feeds him. Interesting, when Jesus caught up with the disciples, when there was that big catch of fish, then they all come aside onto shore, onto land. And the first thing that Jesus said to Peter is, have you had breakfast yet? I think that's important, because we are a psychosomatic whole, and what's happening physically is also going to affect us in our soul.
Of course, the next thing that he tended to was his spiritual needs, and that order is important, isn't it? The physical first and then the spiritual.
That's right. Now, he got into this depressed state because he was thinking wrong, and so God had to correct some things in his life. As you said earlier on, he thought he was the only one standing up for God, but God said to him, well, actually, no, there's 7,000 others that haven't bowed the knee to Baal. You're not the only one. It's not all upon you, Another thing he says, hey, they seek my life to take it. Now, here's an interesting thing, Phil. To this day, Elijah has not died.
True, yes.
He just was taken miraculously. He's never gone through death.
Yes.
And so he just assumed, well, I'm going to die. Well, no, you're not. And then here's another thing that God revealed to him. First of all, he sent the earthquake, the fire, the wind. But God wasn't in any of those things. He was in the still, small voice. Elijah made that mistake of thinking God is going to be in the sensational. I've called down fire from heaven. This is what's going to do it. God says, no, it's not. Actually, I work silently and secretly and in small ways. That's how I do my work. So he had a lot of retraining of his thinking to do.
Some practical help this week on A Sound Mind. And we'll have more on this discussion tomorrow. Do join us. Until then, remember, you don't have to carry that baggage. God wants you to be set free.
For books, DVDs, small group studies and other resources from Ken Legg, including the book What's Eating You, which features topics from today's message, shop online at vision.org.au. That's vision.org.au.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.